This podcast is made possible in part by Patreon support, and I'd like to say thank you to our newest patron who just joined the $3 a month plus alpha tier, Jillian or Gillian Wachowski. I'm not sure what the correct pronunciation of your name is. I'm so sorry, but I really do appreciate you becoming part of the Patreon. So the $3 a month plus alpha tier comes with access to Japanese Plus Alpha, which is a podcast that I do about the Japanese language, and I talk about all sorts of quirky things about the Japanese language. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to make sure that I can keep producing this show, then go check out japankyo.com/Patreon and sign up for the $3 a month plus alpha tier. Also, don't forget that you can support the show by picking up a t-shirt over at kimitodesigns.com. That's Kimito designs.com. Just posted 2 new t-shirt designs, so go take a look. Are, ciao ciao ciao.
Yeah, ciao 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 ciao. That was a conversation.
Welcome to Ichimon Japan. I'm Tony.
And I'm Ryan.
And today we are once again joined by Saori.
Hello.
Welcome back, Saori.
Hello.
Thank you.
So Saori's a friend of ours, and you're calling in from the U.S., but you are born and raised in Japan, and but you've been in the U.S. for quite a while now, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
But you are actually from Osaka, which is going to be something that we're going to be talking about today, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's introduce the topic, and then we'll get into it. So Ichimon means one question, and every episode we ask a question about Japan. And today's question is, what is Kansai-ben? All right. So first of all, I guess we should start with Kansai for anybody that's not aware. Kansai is usually the simplest explanation. It's like Western Japan, although, I mean, to be more specific, it's like Osaka, Kyoto, Hyogo, what else?
Wakayama.
Nara. Wakayama, Nara. Sometimes I guess people say Shiga, Mie. Although sometimes those get kind of, there's a little debate about like maybe some parts of Mie are Kansai, some parts are not, and then it gets a little confusing. And even within the same prefecture, sometimes people say yes, no. But usually, I think most people say for sure it's like Hyogo, Nara, Kyoto, Osaka. Like that's the kind of the core of the Kansai area. And now I just got all the people from Shiga and Mie angry. Sorry.
A bunch of angry letters. How dare you?
But all of us have experience in the Kansai area. I lived both in Osaka, to be specific, in Hiragata City, and in Kobe. Ryan, what areas of Osaka did you live in?
I lived in Sakai City and Osaka City.
Okay. And Saori, what area were you in?
Yeah, I lived in Osaka City my entire life. Yeah, I was born and raised.
All right, awesome. So Kansai-ben. Ben is this suffix that you add to usually a place name, and that describes a dialect. So we're going to be talking about the Kansai dialect. And this is, I would say, I mean, I've read this in an academic paper, and I think just by experience, outside of the quote-unquote standard dialect, which is what originated in the Tokyo area, I would say the Kansai dialect is the most commonly heard and well-known and understood dialect in Japan. And Saori, did you grow up speaking Kansai-ben? Like, what is your experience with the dialect?
Yeah, I did speak Kansai-ben growing up. I think I'm, how do you call it? Like, Kisui no Kansaijin? Like, Osaka-ben is like my like first native language. That's how it feels. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
like in my family,
perfect.
Both of my parents, they're born and raised in Osaka too. So, yeah.
But I assume you also, which this is something very common, but you must kind of switch, and with certain people you speak a little more Osaka-ben, with certain people you speak a little more, standard dialect.
Yeah, when I worked For a Japanese company, when I was living in Chicago, I was speaking like standard Japanese, like with my colleagues. And maybe outside of work, sometimes I would speak Osaka-ben with colleagues, with my colleagues from like Osaka and Kansai area. But yeah, in professional work settings, not so much. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's super common, like with all dialects, right? Like usually in the workplace, or maybe people you don't know that well, standard dialect, but with your friends, your family, you're going to usually, at least to some extent, speak a little bit more on the dialect side of things.
Yeah.
Ryan, so what's your experience with dialect? When you got to Osaka, were you familiar with it, or did you? I hear a lot of people, often they get confused by the dialect when they first get there because all you learn in school is like the standard dialect.
I had been told it existed in a handful of phrases, like "nande yanen," but that was about it. However, it was my first actual experience living in Japan, so it kind of became my default. Well, I guess when you're a foreigner living in Japan, I think you get like soft Kansai-ben from people where they don't go too hard on it, but it's still not quite standard. So that weird hybrid version of it became my default Japanese.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like, I mean, the university where I went to, of course, was in Osaka, and there's a lot of people from Osaka there, obviously, and so you just hear it, you absorb it, and I never made an effort to speak it, but I definitely got like so comfortable listening to it that sometimes, like, I remember specifically one memory where maybe it had been the first time that I'd been to Tokyo in a very long time, and I got off the train and all I was hearing around me was like the standard dialect, and it just felt really strange to not be hearing anybody with the intonation or it's using that kind of occasionally like different words, and it just felt weird not to be hearing Osaka dialect. So like you just get used to it, you absorb it after a while, and then you stop even thinking about it, because I think, like you said, even if they're not speaking to you in like 100% super stereotypical Osaka dialect, there's still like occasional words, some certain features like the intonation that are always there, or a lot of times there.
Yeah, the intonation's there, and like very famous phrases are there. Like people still use akan instead of dame or stuff around me.
Yeah, definitely.
Or ya instead of da.
Yeah. Akang. Yeah, that is. We'll get into some of the more common ones, but I guess we should just give a little bit of, general overview before we get into some of the specific features. But the Kansai dialect, of course, like I said, is mainly the Kansai area, but just because you are from Osaka, you were born and raised in Osaka, doesn't necessarily mean that you'll speak super stereotypical Osaka dialect. Just because, for example, there's also different variations within the regions. Kyoto dialect, there's also like the Kobe dialects, and even within Osaka, like the southern Osaka, there's different variations. So just because you live in a certain region doesn't mean you will speak 100% that dialect. There's influence, there's kind of, depending on who you're talking to. Maybe if you're from Kyoto, you want to sound tough like some guy from Osaka. Like there's different reasons why people like speak different ways. So yeah, it's complicated, but we're speaking mainly today about the Osaka dialect, which is, I think, become really, really prevalent because of the media as well, right? Like Japanese comedians, of course, manzai kind of comedy. There's a lot of people that speak the classic-ish Osaka dialect, and so that's just become kind of a trendy-ish thing. But just keep in mind that just because somebody's born in Osaka, that doesn't mean that they're speaking like, the classic Osaka dialect. I think generally, and I would love to get your input on this, Audi, but when you start to think of a more stereotypical Osaka dialect sound, it tends to be a little bit, people a little bit older.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think this image of like Osakana Oba-chan is very strong.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the Osaka no Oba-chan, we should explain what that is, but the kind of older Osaka woman, and there's kind of a stereotype. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that she wears leopard print
Yes,
shirts,
leopard
right?
print shirts or like, yeah, pants or leopard print anything.
Yeah.
And permed hair, maybe.
Permed hair, there you go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And she'll give you candy on the train or whatever. Ame-chan. Yeah. So there's certain stereotypes, and some people do fit these stereotypes.
Yeah, some people do. Some people don't.
Some people do. And some people really, really embrace it.
Yeah.
So as someone who's from Osaka City, how often do you wear leopard print clothing?
You know, that's a great question. I do have a pair of like leopard print like denim pants that I got from Banana Republic, but I don't really wear them here.
That's for when you go home. So you do get, some people like that. They really embrace the whole Osaka thing. But then, there's people that are a little bit more subdued. Like I said, maybe a little bit more just intonation, occasional word, verb conjugations here and there. Yeah. Like one thing that I notice is, for example, this very, very common word, okini, which basically is thank you, right? Yeah. Usually I only hear that older people at restaurants and shops say that. I don't hear younger people tell me okini, right?
I don't think I ever say okini. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the only time that I hear okini is when I'm leaving a shop after eating there, right?
Or like when I was little, like I would go to, like with my mom, I would go to these like yaoyasan. Or like
like the grocer.
Yeah, grocers. And then they would say, okini, when we bought something. But I can't think of anything else. Yeah, that's probably
See, I wonder, like, it's jobs like that. Do they like, do jobs like that attract the people that speak like that? Or do people that already speak like that end up working there?
I think it has something to do with like Osaka being like a merchant city. A background. True. So I think, like talking and like communication in general has a, unique way of expression, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. So, a little historical background, but, Osaka is known as being this place where there were a lot of merchants, a place for business. And so, one thing that I've read is that, at least part of the reason why you get certain features of the Osaka dialect is because, in being this kind of like friendly, energetic, kind of fun use of the language, it helps you with business. And so I guess maybe even now, certain business people, especially in that kind of, I guess a little bit more on the blue collar side of things, they embrace that kind of personality, that way of speaking, and it's just become a thing that you do. And I wouldn't even say it's a conscious decision. I'm sure for the vast majority of people, it's totally unconscious, but there's just something there that makes you go like, if you're doing business, you want to have a good personality, energetic, you want to bring in people, you want to hook them in. And one way to do that is with fun, a good personality with this fun dialect, right?
Yeah.
So let's specifically say a few of the most interesting, I think, distinctive features. And I think one of the things that people notice, I'm talking about Japanese people that notice right away, even if you're using all the correct words, if you're using all the correct conjugations, one of the things that people will notice right away is if you're getting the intonation incorrect, right? The tone, right? Because Kansai versus Kanto, which is like the Tokyo area, or many other dialects, has a very distinctive, different way of intonating tones for the word. And one of the criticisms, for example, when an actor from Tokyo tries to do like portray a character from Kansai and he gets it all wrong, like that's like cringe right there. That's like people like, no, he got it all wrong. You can't do that.
That's so true.
Yeah. You notice right away, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of like, it's almost like an American doing a really bad like British or Australian accent or something like that, right? It's just like, oh, I can't listen to it. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, how's your Osaka accent?
There was a time where it was not great, but now that I've been outside of Osaka for almost a decade, it's almost zero. So I'm not even going to attempt it now.
Yeah.
How's yours, Tony?
So I can make some bad attempts, and I'm sure it will just come out later in this episode. But I have been told once or twice by people like, oh, like your intonation right there sounded like Kansai-ish, like. And then I go like, I don't know. It wasn't on purpose. Maybe it was purely an accident and a coincidence, or maybe it was me unconsciously absorbing from, my experiences talking to people in Kansai and my friends and all that. So I don't know. I don't make a conscious decision to sound Kansai-ish, but maybe sometimes I do, and I don't even realize it.
I have the opposite story, and it makes me sad because when I lived there, occasionally I would hear the same thing. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I left Kansai in 2012, and now it's 2021, so 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And now when I talk with people like where I live in Ishikawa, if I mention I used to live in Kansai, I often hear, wow, your Japanese doesn't sound Kansai at all. and it makes me sad.
Yeah. Like when this is not totally related, but in the same kind of vein of like you absorb things without even realizing it. Like I live in Hawaii now, and a couple years ago, a friend from Osaka came to visit, and she was born and raised from Osaka. And when I saw her again and I started talking to her, I realized like she sounds so Osaka, and I didn't even realize it like back before when we were seeing each other every single day. But that's just, you are absorbing this without even realizing it. And a lot of people really do start to imitate it without even realizing it. So yeah, it happens.
Yeah, when I went to Tokyo, I was told that like, oh my God, your Osaka-ben sounds like so much like Osaka-ben. Like you sound like from Osaka, like immediately. And that person was from Osaka living in Tokyo. So I think my Osaka-ben must have sounded more Osaka than his Osaka-ben. So I guess, when you're absorbed in it, you don't realize how Osakan you sound when you're speaking, but yeah.
Did you ever, like, do you have to, like, for example, in you enter the workforce and you're working at a Japanese company, did there come a time when you said, like, when you made a decision like, oh, I have to do this, and did you have, like, trouble doing it, like switching to the standard dialect, or was that fairly easy?
Switching it from Osaka-ben to standard Japanese is pretty easy.
Okay.
And yeah, so people actually didn't know that I was from Osaka until I got to know them a little better and I started talking in Osaka-ben. But switching part is fairly easy when switching from standard Japanese to Osaka-ben is very difficult, I think.
Yeah. Like I said, the actors get so much, It's like, don't even bother if you can't do it right, because people are going to complain. Yeah. So, of course, the intonation is huge. Saori, can you illustrate for us the hashi thing? Can you do the... Can you do that? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah. So, I guess with chopsticks... in Kanto, it'll be hashi. But we say hashi. I don't know. Does that sound different?
It sounded different to me, but yeah. But most people, when they first start out with Japanese, they go, that sounded exactly the same. What did you just do?
Yeah. And the bridge might be even more subtle. Kanto would be like, hashi. And Kansai
Sounds like a
would
question
be,
when you say it like that.
hashi. Actually, I don't know with that one. That didn't sound that different even to me. But with chopsticks, it was easier. Yeah, hashi.
Yeah.
Or
right.
hashi.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hashi.
Hashi.
Don't worry. I'm not going to make you, pronounce a whole list of words. But there is tons of stuff that you can find. Like even people in Japan love these differences, and there's YouTube videos and like people from Kansai counting versus people from Kanto counting, and there's different intonation and different rhythm. So there's tons of this stuff. You can find it online. But there is definitely a big difference in the pitch accent and in the intonation. And once you get used to hearing Japanese, you can identify it right away. Even if you can't tell this is Kansai, you can tell like, whoa, this person sounds different, like right away. So there's tons of that. There's also like a vowel like elongation or consonant shortening that happens. For example, one really, really common thing is the verb to say in past tense in the standard dialect is itta, right? But in Kansai, you're more likely to hear yutta, right? There's also, I think, katta, like the past tense of buy versus kota, right? So, there's different. I also saw skota, which is the past tense of use. Skata would be in standard dialect, but in Kansai dialect, if you really want to say it that way, you would say it's skota. I don't know if I've heard that often, but you do hear it from time to time.
My grandma says it all the time.
Oh, there you go. So, yeah. Skota, yeah. There's all kinds of little things that tip you off right away, like, oh, this is not standard dialect. And this can really, when you're a beginning Japanese learner, this can confuse the hell out of you. But, once you have the fundamentals down, then I think you can figure it out through context, because it's not like totally different. There's still a lot of similarities in the sounds, in the basic sounds.
Right.
Another really, really prominent thing is S sounds sometimes get switched to H sounds. And for example, like the suffix san ends up being han.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
So one thing that pops into my mind right away, I think, well, Saudi, you'll definitely know the Keihan line, right? The Keihan train line in Osaka connects Kyoto to Osaka. And the Keihan train line, I don't know if they still have this character, but there was like a female, a woman kind of mascot, and her name was O-Keihan.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, that's a perfect example. Yeah, O-Keihan.
Yeah. So that is a pun because the train line is Keihan, right? And the Han in this case is... What's the kanji? Is that Osaka?
Yeah, Han is the
Saka from Osaka, right? Yeah. So the kanji is the Saka from Osaka because it connects Osaka to K. Is that the Kyoto?
K is, yeah.
Kyo, okay. So connects Kyoto to Osaka, so you get Keihan. And then the Han is actually the pun here because we're talking about the san turns into Han, and this woman's name is K, I guess. Okay, and then you end up with the O, which is this respectful, again, Kansai dialect feature, and you end up with O-K-Han. And that probably entertained like two people. I'm sorry, that was really long, but that is, I think I probably first noticed the Han thing through that. And I wonder, why is her name O-K-Han? And then a friend of mine explained it to me and I go, oh, okay, now I know. So yeah, Han. And then here's a bad joke, but, obviously, Han Solo is from Kansai because in Japanese his name would be Solo Han, right? So, yay! Yay!
Did you make that, or did someone tell you
I did make that up. That's totally my own creation right there. I am ready to make my debut in the Japanese entertainment industry with my ippatsu gyagu, my one-trick pony there.
You go out, you say that joke, you just walk off stage, and they sit there in silence for the next hour.
Mic drop right there. So, you guys, anybody listening, you're free to use that joke right there, right? So another place where this S to H switch happens is with this with this commonly used verb suffix, hen. So, for example, ikimasen, I will not go, becomes ikimahen, right? And then that can get shortened to ikahen, right? Did I get that right? Right?
Yeah.
And then that can be past tense, you would get ikahen kata, right? So, the hen suffix is super common. That's basically the equivalent of nai in the standard dialect, which is negation. So, did not go in that case, right? Ikanai, ikahen, did not go. But the sen, the original sen in the ikimasen becomes the hen, and that's the sh transposition, I guess you would say. But yeah, that pops up here and there. That's another super common feature. But like I said, we can't go into all the kind of phonological things because we would be here just forever. let's take a quick break here, and then we'll get back into some of the specific words that can pop up from time to time. Hey, Tony here, and just going to mention a few things before we get back into the show. First of all, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. That is the number one free thing you can do to support the show. When you subscribe, it usually, I think on most podcast apps, it positively affects the rankings, which means that it's easier for more people to find the show. And if you want to make sure that I can keep bringing you more content like this, then a great thing to do is to make sure that the rankings keep going up. And it won't cost you anything extra. So, hey, we all win. Also, don't forget to leave a rating and a review. And if you do your shopping on Amazon and you want to support the show, then go ahead and use the Amazon affiliate link, japankyo.com/Amazon. Another thing you can do is go check out the merch shop. I guess I have that. It's kimitodesigns.com. I post up designs inspired primarily by the stuff that we talk about here on Ichimon Japan. The latest 2 t-shirts are all about bird rabbits. And if you don't know what a bird rabbit is, well, actually, there's no such thing as a bird rabbit, but go listen to the previous episode of Ichimon Japan. It is all about that topic. But again, kimitodesigns.com. And of course, I think most of you by now know that I also do another podcast, Japan Station. That's where I interview interesting people about their connections to and expertise in Japan-related topics. So go check out episode 64. It is all about Yuji Haraguchi. So Yuji Haraguchi is a chef and fish expert who has had multiple restaurants in Japan and New York. He's based in Brooklyn, and he has a Japanese-style fish market as well as okonomi and Yuji Ramen, all very interesting businesses. And he talks all about ramen and fish and his career. So go check that out. That is episode 64. You can find it on your podcast app of choice or at japanstationpodcast.com. All right, commercial over. Let's get back into the rest of the episode. So just a quick thing about something we said towards the end of part 1. But so I was talking about sen in, for example, ikimasen, the negation becoming ikimahen. And there certainly seems to be something there with the relationship from what I read of the transposing the S to the H. But something that we're not sure about is when you're talking about plain form verbs, dictionary form verbs, whatever you want to call it, the shorter form verbs, you also use the hen. But did that come from sen, or was that like the original form? Like, Ryan, what you want to add something?
Yeah, so I have not read the history of this specifically, so it's just kind of my guess, but usually the short form dictionary form is actually like the root version of it. I know like for foreigners, Americans or whatever, learning Japanese, you learn the desmos form first and then the short form after. But in like an actual Japanese, the short form is the original and the desmos is derived from it.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the longer version, like if we're using iku, you have ikimasen, ikimahen. But in the original version, it would just be iku, ikahen.
Right.
And the original form doesn't have an S. It would be ikanai, ikahen. So
yeah,
I'm not positive it's derived from an S switch.
Yeah, that's something that we're not sure about. And unfortunately, I didn't see anything specifically addressing that side of things. I just saw, I was reading a paper that discussed the phonological differences and mentioned ikimasen becoming ikimahen. And so, yeah, I don't know. That I just thought that maybe that's where the hen came from, but I can't say that for sure. So,
the san suffix becoming han, though, does seem to be just S to H, but
yeah.
That's not a grammar thing exactly.
Right. So one other thing that I wanted to bring up before we dive into some words and phrases is that usually, if you look at, there are these maps of dialect distribution, I guess you would say, in Japan, and they're super interesting because there's tons of dialects across Japan. And one feature that you notice when you start to look at different characteristics of these dialects is that they tend to have more in common with the dialects that are adjacent to them geographically. So, for example, Hiroshima, Okayama tends to sound more like the Kansai dialects than it would sound like, for example, the the standard Tokyo dialect. So there are certain features that they share, and not 100%. There's still differences, and you can tell them if once you know, but they tend to be way more similar. And the farther away you get from a certain dialect, the more variations that you get, and sometimes they just sound really, really different. And you go like, "Whoa, that must be like Kagoshima or something." Like I don't know what you're saying. Like it can get to that point if you're not familiar with a certain dialect. So, Ryan, what about where you are in Ishikawa? Like, is that does it sound kind of Kansai-ish? Does it sound something else? What have you noticed?
I would say it's like directly in the middle. There are definitely Kansai-ish elements, but a lot of it's also kind of standard. Like here they do say Metcha. So in Kansai, the copula da often gets switched for ya, so like so ya instead of so da. That also occurs here. But we don't have hen, we don't have akan. Although we have ya, we don't have yade. Some people say yayo.
Yayo. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. So yeah, it's really fun. Like I love dialects. And I think unfortunately we can't go super in depth because I think some people would start to get really like overwhelmed and kind of bored by some of the things that we would get into. But once you get to a certain level of Japanese, it's really fun looking at these little differences and then noticing, for example, like I know in Okayama they do use the verb form oru instead of iru, but also in Osaka they use the verb form oru, right? So also in Kyoto in certain situations, in Okayama they don't use ya though, they use ja. Right? They use like ja and jaken. Right? So, but in Osaka, they don't use ja and jaken. They use ya and different various like yaro and stuff like that. So it's really fun learning these things. And I don't know, I enjoy it, but maybe not the best topic for a podcast. It's like, this is the difference here. It's just a list. This is like really the thing you have to kind of like read in a book, I think. But anyway, so let's get into some of these verbs and or words and phrases, some of which we've mentioned already. But I think the very first one that we have is nande yanen, right? You have to talk about that if we're talking about Kansai dialect, right? Can you say it for us, Saori?
Nande yanen.
Perfect. Yeah. Nande yanen, exactly.
Nande yanen.
You got to get the intonation right, otherwise they're going to say like, don't even bother.
Nande yanen.
Nande yanen. So nande yanen is basically like it's a very versatile phrase, but like in standard dialect you could say it might be something like nande dayo or something like that. But it's basically like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Why did you say that? What's up with you? Like there's so many different translations that you could come up with depending on the context. And what's really interesting about this phrase is that on the surface, it's aggressive because you're questioning the other person, like what they just said, what they just did. You're almost implying like, it's kind of stupid what they just did. Again, depends on the context, but usually when you're saying this, you're doing it in a very friendly manner. You're kind of joking around with them. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe that you just said that. And you're not really confronting them literally. It's kind of showing like you guys are close, you're friends, you're questioning what they just said or did in a friendly way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And you often see this, of course, in Japanese comedy and manzai, of course, which the whole dynamic is like the stereotypical dynamic. There's, of course, people that break the pattern, but, usually you have the straight man, which is the guy that corrects the other guy, which is the kind of the boke, which is the what's the term for that?
Tsukomi.
The tsukomi and the boke, but in English you would say the straight man and the Ryan.
I'm trying to think too. What is the other guy called?
Oh,
what is the other guy? The straight man and the oh my gosh, I can't remember. There's
the other guy. That's what they're called.
Yeah, the straight man and the guy that messes everything up. He says all the stupid, silly things. But anyway, the straight man, of course, he has to get everything correct. He's the serious guy, so he'll say "nande yanen" to the boke, the silly guy, right? Because he's correcting him.
Yeah.
And that's basically a cue for everybody to laugh.
Yeah.
It's like, here's the joke, let's laugh. So super, super common. I would say you hear it pretty often both in daily life and in media, but try not to overuse it because otherwise you'll just sound like you're trying too hard.
Yeah.
So
I will throw out there two things about this is way back when I first moved to Osaka, I don't think I bought it, but I found a book in the US that was like how to teach Osaka-ben to people learning Japanese. And the name of the book was undying.
yeah, that's pretty much where everybody starts. That's one of the first things you notice. Yeah.
Second thing, even as a non-native, I can also identify fake Osaka-ben. I don't remember what game it was, but there was a character in it that was supposed to be from Osaka, and they so ridiculously overused nandayanen, like every other sentence.
Yeah.
That it was like, no one talks like that. Shut up. I hate this character now.
Yep. Once you understand, you can't not understand, and it just bothers you. Yeah.
Feels insulting.
All right. So this is another pretty common one that you learn pretty soon. It's aho. And,
I feel like you hear it often as ahoka.
Ahoka, yeah. Yeah, I certainly still use that a lot. I think the most common one that I use is ahoka, which I will explain in a moment. But can you pronounce that for us, Audi?
Ahoka.
It just both of these. It sounds like you're disagreeing with me. It's like, can you do it for me? It's like, you idiot, right? So again, aho, it sounds kind of aggressive, like you're confronting somebody, but usually you're using it in this kind of tongue-in-cheek. I don't know, like kind of. Both of you know that you're not literally being aggressive, right? You both of you understand that you're being. It's friendly. It comes off as friendly, if you're using. Yeah, when you're using it with the right person. Yes, in some situations you can call somebody aho, idiot, stupid, foolish, and it can be like you're picking a fight. But usually, in most cases that you hear it, it's friendly. Mm-hmm. And ahoka is almost like nandeyanen in that you're saying like, are you an idiot? Because basically you're implying like what they just said or did was stupid. So you're questioning what they did. And again, comes off as friendly in most situations. You can use it to pick a fight if you use it in the right way.
It's your choice, yeah.
Yeah. A very context is ultimately what is most important. I was very curious about where this word came from. And unfortunately, I spent a couple hours, if not more, trying to find something solid on this. And the etymology of this is just completely, there's nothing solid on this. There's just some theories that I don't particularly think are credible. Basically, most of them say that they came from Chinese in some way. So, for example, one says that there was this very big palace in Qin Dynasty, Qin Dynasty, the first Chinese dynasty back in like the 200 BCs. There was this very big palace, and it was so big that it was basically like stupidly big, and it either caused like financial ruin or it burned down for like 3 months. Like it was so big that it took 3 months to burn down. Basically, it ended poorly, and it was so big that it was just problematic, and thus this palace was called the Abo Kyuden in Japanese, and so Abo became Aho. I don't believe this. I couldn't find anything to like solid to back this up, and I found articles that said like there's no real good mention of this in the literature, so basically the etymology is unknown. The other popular theory that I saw was that around the Muromachi period, so that was like 1400s to 1500s, there was trade between the Ming Dynasty in China and Korea. And at that time, I think it was like 12 trading incidents where I guess people from China were coming to Japan. And so a word that was from a dialect in China that, according to the article that I was reading, was pronounced something like "tai," ended up becoming "aho." Again, I don't really believe this. I think that with such a small number of people from China coming to Japan, I find it very hard to believe that that would influence the language so much that it would replace whatever word they already had for basically stupid or whatever, right? Because this is such a commonly used word, you would figure that they had some word already. So I don't know. To me, these etymologies seem pretty fishy, so I wouldn't believe them.
Interesting.
So the point is, aho, we don't know where it came from. There's maybe maybe a source in like 13th century, I think, or no, it was like 15th century Japan, where it was a Kango word. So it was a kanji word that was pronounced ahao. And there's another theory that maybe it came from there. So again, from Chinese, but nothing's for certain. So don't worry about it. Just learn it and tell people ahoka when they're joking around with you. So there you go.
Just call everyone aho. It'll go over smoothly.
Yeah. Tell everybody aho. Yeah.
Especially in Kanto, they love it there.
Yeah. So I guess I should be explicit here in saying that aho is basically the Kansai equivalent of baka, right? Baka is the commonly used word for like stupid or idiot or something like that. But in Kansai,
Right.
you're more likely to hear aho.
Right. I've also heard that people think though like aho is a little like stronger than baka, maybe just a little
Yeah.
bit. Well, maybe it's the way Osaka-ben speakers say aho, but
Yeah.
it sounds, I don't know, possibly more aggressive / more scary than like baka da ne or something like that.
Out of curiosity, if you were like actually upset with someone and wanted to call them stupid, like one of your friends or family, would you use aho or baka?
Aho. I think aho.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have heard that in Kanto, aho is stronger, but that some people think in Kansai, baka is stronger if you're like actually upset.
Because we don't use baka
Yeah,
so
because
much.
it's
When we
the
do,
less-
it
Yeah,
carries
yeah.
more. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever said baka before. Well, hopefully I'm not saying this seriously to anybody, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think I would say aho instead of baka. Yeah.
So I do want to bring up perception and kind of these differences, something related to here what we're talking about, but I'll do that in a moment. First, let's get through a few more of these words. So the next one is super common one that already was mentioned, but Metcha. Right?
Yeah, this one's
Metcha.
spread outside of Osaka. Like I said, even
Yeah,
Yeah.
this one has basically become so common that people, outside of Kansai, Osaka, use it quite commonly. So yeah, this is basically very or a lot or greatly or something like that. It's basically like emphasis. And you could say that in the Kanto dialect and the standard dialect, it would be like totemo or something along those lines. Sugoku or something like
yeah,
that.
it corresponds to like cho.
Cho, yeah, it
Cho.
could be cho as well.
Yeah.
But Metcha has become super common, basically to the point where non-dialect speakers are using it. Next one is okini. Could you say that one for us, Saudi?
Okini. Okini.
Every time, yeah, it sounds like you're like interacting with me and not just saying the word. Yeah, again, we said this basically means thank you. And usually you only really hear it when you're, at a shop or something like that. Normally, like Saudi said, people on the younger side of things, I would say even like into, maybe even into 40s, maybe, and lower. You don't hear them so much, but then when you see like the older couple at the shop that they run a restaurant or something, it might be like 50s or older, and yeah, you definitely hear it a lot. Okini as you're leaving the store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, this seems to have come from. Basically, this is like, it means something like very or greatly. Okini or like arigato.
Big thank
so
you.
it's like, yeah, big thank you.
Oh.
Basic, literally, you could translate it like that, I guess. Yeah. So the thank you part got dropped, and now it's just the greatly.
It's like big.
Yeah, big, greatly,
I guess
greatly
like
what?
bigly.
Bigly, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Bigly. Thank you, Bigly. I think that's how you should say it in English. Yeah. Thank you, Bigly.
No, you gotta cut the whole thing. It's just bigly.
Bigly. Yeah. So literally, it means Bigly. Yes. All right. Let's do a couple more of these. Okay. And then shikata ga nai, which basically means like there's nothing that can be done. It can't be helped. But in Kansai dialect, how would you say that, Saudi?
Shanai.
Shana.
Shanai na.
Yeah,
I was gonna say it's
shana.
always
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
always shanai na.
Yeah. Yes. I think we've gotten to another super common one. So in the standard dialect, if something's not good, if you need to tell somebody don't do that, you might say dame, right? But in Osaka dialect, you would say, Saudi?
Akan.
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 Akan. Exactly. You got to get the intonation there right too. So, yeah. So that again basically means dame, which, you know, that if you're correcting somebody, if they're I don't know, saying poor, if they're getting their Kansai intonation very poorly, then you would say akan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I looked into the etymology of this one, and this one I did get something believable. And it seems to have come from the phrase rachi ga akanu, which that's kind of basically in a more modern way of conjugating that would be rachi ga akanai, which means basically something not going well, something not good in a very larger sense, kind of you're almost kind of giving up on something in a way. Basically something not going well. And so the rachi ga akanai, the akanai part got shortened to akan, right? Which is something that happens in a lot of dialects. The nai form just gets shortened to n. So akan or tabenai, which is not eat, can become taben, I guess, you know, like
taben,
you can do this with a lot of different verbs in not just Western dialects, but there's a lot of instances of this. So, but yeah, akan just basically became its own thing. Let's do one more. I mean, we could keep going and going and going, but this is another one very, very common. I just want to focus on this one, and then we'll discuss a couple other things briefly. But chow.
Chow.
Very, very, very common. Basically the equivalent of chigao in standard dialect, and that literally means different, to be different. But chow is used a little bit more widely than just simply chigao in the standard dialect. It can be used like kore ga chigao, right? This is different. This is incorrect. This is not right. You could say kore chao, right? You could say that.
Yeah.
But you can also use chow requesting as a way to request somebody to agree with you, or like to confirm with somebody. Basically how you would say isn't it in English, right?
Janaika?
Like, yeah, or janaika in standard dialect, right? But like this is fun, isn't it? I don't know, something like that, right? So
Yeah.
Bad example, but you know, you get the idea. So there's this very, very famous, like it's famous to the point where it's like this cheesy gag that it's not, how can I put it? Like people probably cringe when they hear this in Osaka because it's just such a classic, such an old cheesy gag, but that plays off of chow, right? Mm-hmm. And so let me be person A here, I guess, and then you can be person B, Saudi.
Got it.
So basically we're talking about the dog breed that is a chow chow, right? And I see a chow chow, or I see what I think is a chow chow, and I'm going to ask Saudi if this is a chow chow, and she's going to respond with her answer. So let me start. So, are chow chow chow?
Yeah. Chow 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 chow. That was a conversation.
That was a conversation, yes. That makes total sense in Osaka dialect.
This is so cheesy. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It's
it is
hilarious.
like the cheesiest damn thing in the world. Yeah. But you got to know it. So chow chow, again, the dog, the chow chow. And then I said are, which is that. So I'm pointing presumably to a dog that I think is a chow chow. And then I ask, is that a chow chow to Saori? By putting in the chow at the end. And then she says, yeah, like, no, that's not a chow chow, isn't it? Basically, that like she's saying it's not a chow chow, but she's asking for my agreement by using the last chow.
Right.
So, yeah. Yep. There you go. That's whenever you explain a joke like that, it gets even less funny. But There you go. But I remember there was when I was living in Osaka, there was a commercial that used this joke, and unfortunately I couldn't find a video of it on YouTube. But yeah, it's a super well known like cheesy gag. So yeah. But yeah, these are some of the most common ones, I think. But there's others that are like very much not known, but only very, very, very like regional. For example, I found this term that I had never heard before, boko boko egui. And so this is from the Kishiwada area of Osaka prefecture, which is in like the southern area of Osaka prefecture. And apparently boko boko is like Metcha, like totemo, very. And then egui literally means like gross or something like that, or like gory, or in a standard dialect. But boko boko egui just means like awesome, like sugoi, like really good, or something like that. So this is something in the Kishiwada area, but most people, even in the same Osaka area, would not understand this.
I did not know this. Wow.
Yeah. So another thing, this is one that I learned because I lived in Kobe, but dabo. Have you ever heard this, Saudi? Dabo?
Dabo? No.
Yeah. So this is Kobe area. Dabo is basically like baka or aho. So stupid, foolish. And what I looked into this, and apparently the origin is do aho.
Oh, okay.
So do is another like emphasis, right? Word, kind of like mecha, right? So very aho, very stupid. But do aho ends up becoming dabo in the Kobe area. So yeah. Not super, super common, but it was common enough where I was working at my school, and one of the teachers who was not from Kobe one day was saying like, you know what, the other day I heard dabo and I'd never heard this before, and I learned it, and so I learned it from him explaining that he had learned it. So so apparently it comes up from time to time. But yeah, there's plenty of little variations within each region. Kyoto, of course, has its own kind of different dialect too, which is still related to the Osaka dialect, but there's plenty of variation there as well. So yeah, no way to cover everything. But one last thing that I want to cover before we close things out is kind of perception of these different dialects. Ryan, what would you say? We already covered this a little bit, but like, what's the kind of stereotype of the Osaka person? What would you say?
Well, I guess there's positive and negatives. So they're strongly associated with comedy.
Yeah.
So humorous, friendly, casual. I guess you could maybe say honest.
Direct, I guess.
Yeah, direct. That sounds good.
Yeah.
I only have positive associations since I liked living in Osaka.
Yeah. Well, I love Osaka too. Yeah.
Yeah, negatives could be like rude, too direct. It's also often associated with like yakuza style Japanese. Yeah.
So this is brought up in academic research, and there's surveys, and there's different things that talk about this. But if you really think about it, basically Osaka dialect, right? It has that kind of casual, direct kind of association with it. But if you're casual and direct with somebody in the wrong circumstance, then that can come off as rude and aggressive and scary, right? So it's the same thing. It's just it depends on how you interpret it, depending on the situation. And then the yakuza thing is one thing that I was reading is that maybe it became associated with yakuza speech because in movies, oftentimes, like if you watch like a was it Kitano Takeshi like movie or something, like you hear a lot of like Osaka dialect yakuza in those kinds of movies. But the biggest yakuza group in Japan is based in Kobe. That's the Yamaguchi Gumi. So that probably influenced a lot, kind of public perception. One very common feature of that style of speech is the rolling of the R's, right? Like, kono yaro, like something like that, right? Yeah. And that is something that is attributed to the Kansai dialect. And it's something that usually only like guys that really want to sound tough, like they're picking a fight, usually you would only hear in those kind of situations. So of course that comes to be associated with that kind of yakuza, no good kind of ruffian sort of, style of speech. So, now as for example, Kyoto has these like positive associations. It's elegant and refined and, like geisha and this kind of thing, right? And yes, to some extent, there's some truth to that. But the negative side of the coin on that is that Kyoto people are sometimes said to be kind of sarcastic or scary in that they don't show their true like feelings, or kind of like too formal, right? And so again, it's the same
I've heard
kind
them
of thing.
described as like full of themselves.
Yeah, too prideful. Yeah. And you get all kinds of people in Kyoto, right? You get the good and the bad.
Yeah.
But again, it's the same kind of thing where it's like if you're being too elegant, then you may come off as sarcastic in some situations, right? So the point is, Osaka is not necessarily always, super casual and rude. There may be some situations where that's true, and Kyoto may not always be elegant or sarcastic. It just depends on the situation. Like, Ryan, you and I have talked about this so many times, but like language is not one thing. It just depends on the situation in which you're using it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
However, Kansai dialect is the best dialect.
I agree.
Yeah, I love it. So
It's
we're all
objectively
biased
the
here. We're all biased here because, we all live there. But, I certainly love it. And it's the one that I'm most familiar with, even though, Fukuoka, I've become pretty familiar with that one. There's some certainly fun stuff there too. And every dialect has its, really fun stuff. But that's where I spent my first long amount of time in Japan. And I think that's kind of digged its way into my head the deepest. So, yeah. So, I think it's really I've met plenty of people back at the university where I was at that really, really embraced it. They really tried their hardest to learn it. People that were from the US or from other countries. And sometimes they go a little overboard in that they end up being more proficient in Kansai dialect than the standard dialect. And that is fun and great, but I think because even Japanese people do this, right? They have to be aware of when to speak one and when to speak the other and be able to kind of switch between both. So I think that's the best approach. But, for anybody that really wants to learn Kansai dialect, I totally support it. It's fun. And you learn all kinds of things, not just about the language itself, but kind of cultural things as well. So yeah, great stuff. All right. Thank you, Saudi, for joining us and for humoring me with these, making you say things. And
thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. All right.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see you next time.
See y'all next time.